I see the house is full, so I think we can start so that we'll keep the schedule. I would really like to welcome everyone to this competition seminar. We are really proud to host it here in Helsinki. We have the pleasure of having Executive Vice President Teresa Ribera with us. She's visiting Finland for 2 days and she's already had many meetings, but this session will be focused specifically on competition. So she has a huge portfolio responsible for clean, just and competitive transition that covers basically everything that the European Commission is doing currently. But now we have the chance to hear from her how competition policy and competition rules will help us to actually respond to the current challenges. We also have a distinguished professor of law, Petri Kuoppamäki, with us from the Aalto University. I also had the pleasure to work with him in the past, so really happy to see you here. We have many other distinguished speakers. We'll have a panel afterwards, so very good to have this comprehensive discussion looking at the European perspective and the Finnish perspective at the local level. And I think I will not waste time because time is short and there will be probably many questions, so we'll pass the floor to Executive Vice President. She will do her speech. We'll take a couple of questions from the audience. And after that, Professor Kuoppamäki will do his analytical commentary on competition policy and on your speech. And thereafter, we'll have a panel moderated by my colleague Jani, who is here in the front. You already met him. Floor is yours. Thanks.
Good afternoon. It is a great pleasure to be here with you today in the occasion of a trip that I had been willing to set for a very long time, and finally we managed to organize this. And it is such a good news that you count on a permanent representative, an ambassador coming from Brussels that is a professional with experience in competition policy. So I think that we are very well represented here, and I take my ambassador as a special ambassador from DG Comp, which is also good news. I would also like to express my gratitude and appreciation for your attendance to this meeting, for the presence of the Professor Kuoppamäki and the head of the National Competition Authority, Kirsi Leibo, and the experts that will be taking part of the panel on the competition rules and competitiveness in practice that have also quite a long, extensive and intense experience on how competition tools do work, to what extent we identify limits, challenges, or needs to update the way we enforce our competition regulation. But overall, I would like to share with you what it has been 500 days of humble learning on competition. I arrived to this house thinking on my mission letter, the way you could introduce this strong message on the need to be ready for a different world, to address a pro-competitive approach that could take into consideration challenges that are very important for our European economy, our European business community, our consumers and citizens, and how even being aware that we cannot solve everything, that's not our mission. Our mission is a very different one. But of course, we all expect that all the different pieces of a complicated puzzle are coherent. And this means that we needed to update and think how we could be ready for the challenges to come. So it is a very timely moment to take a stop of these 550 days of the mandate. Beautiful, beautiful number. What is the new approach? We try to pay attention and to deliver on something that may sound like an obvious statement, but sometimes we are so involved in the day-to-day challenges that we tend to forget. We want to count on a competition policy that evolves to support Europe's goals, Europe's sustainability, innovation, competitiveness in a very changing world. I would say in a very turbulent goal. In a world where the respect to the law seems to be under attack, predictability becomes a little bit challenging, and we feel that we appreciate, we want, it is an asset to be predictable, reliable, respectful. But at the very same time, this very understanding of the rule of law, the safeguarding of consumers, the well-functioning markets need to be ready for the challenges of today. Putting it differently, it matters to change what needs to be changed while staying true to our core principles in the treaty. And this careful balancing exercise is also the message of the Finland-led paper on competition policy presented in the Competitiveness Council in February. Minister Priester referred to this paper when I attended last week's Competitiveness Council, insisting on the commitment of this country to keep on contributing to this exercise and asking for a similar approach to the European Commission. It has been our compass, and we have worked on the many work streams of the new approach. The first 500 days represent a balancing exercise of modernizing while respecting the foundational principles. And I would say that probably one of the most appealing references that has been under discussion and that is already in a public consultation moment is the relation to the review of the merger guidelines. The discussion is often presented in a very simplistic manner. We tend to get these simplistic approaches in our day-to-day life, whether it is simplification or standards, whether it is competitiveness or sustainability, whether it is effectiveness or democracy. But no, reality may be complex, but we want to bring things, making the right balances and attending the different goals. Reality is complex, and so we do, but we need to be coherent when coming up with the proposals that we can make. So, let's forget about that narrow framing, either competitiveness of competition. We cannot choose between the two of them and pick one and forget about the other. We would not count on a competitive economy if it is not based on competition. And if there is no competition, it could be very difficult to become competitive, to stay competitive. Europe does need a scale, companies capable of competing globally, but we Europeans know that we also need to be contestable markets and incentives for firms to innovate and grow, because we want to keep on betting on our competitiveness for the time to come. With this in mind, we published the draft guidelines on the 30th of April. I may recall some of the main elements present in these guidelines. Clear criteria to encourage mergers that create pro-competitive scale in the single market. Comprehensive rules to assess efficiencies, including over a longer time frame, to take account of the longer investment cycles of sectors like telecom or energy. An innovation shield, a safe harbor for innovative startups, to scale up through mergers with legal certainty that their mergers could not raise competition concerns. And the need to reflect today's market realities by integrating the concepts of sustainability and resilience in the guidelines. For those concepts, theory may well be put into practice in the short term in a deal familiar to Finns, joint ventures envisaged between some companies involving a Finnish one. The public consultation on the merger guidelines is open until 26th of June, and we would be very happy to count on your contributions. We have been working on the antitrust front as well. On the 1st of May, the revised technology transfer block exemption regulation entered into force, along with the related guidelines. The revised rules on the previous framework, which stakeholders agreed work well, helps into the update. Allow me to remind some of the features of the digital economy. The strategic importance of data and the increased use of standard essential technologies to enable interoperability. The result is a clear, up-to-date and operational framework to enable pro-competitive technology licensing, thereby facilitating technology dissemination, incentivizing initial research and development, and accelerating innovation. Let me also mention two key ongoing antitrust projects. Firstly, the new guidelines on exclusionary abuses under Article 102 of the treaty. We are modernizing antitrust enforcement by codifying decades of experience and case law. We plan to release the guidelines after the summer, providing comprehensive guidance on how the Commission will look at abusive practice that can exclude competitors. Secondly, we are revising the antitrust procedural rules for the first time in over 20 years. In its own way, this procedural framework introduced a new approach in 2003. It has been a success. Indeed, in Regulation 1/2003, we moved to the self-assessment model. From then, companies had to do their own antitrust analysis of their conduct rather than seek approval from the Commission. Second, we created a community of national enforcers, including the Finnish Competition Authority. Authorities that can apply EU competition rules in parallel to the Commission. Since then, more than 90% of decisions enforcing EU antitrust rules have been taken by national enforcers. After 20 years, what can we do to improve enforcement? There are things that can make a difference. Let's think on how we can modernize investigative powers, such as through remote inspections for data that is increasingly cloud-based, digital. We can enable faster and more effective Commission intervention, such as by making interim measures easy to use. We can simplify procedural elements, for instance, by streamlining access to file processes. The feedback in the consultation will support our upcoming legislative proposals. Today, it is also a good opportunity to refer to two key reviews concerning our most recent instruments. About a month ago, we published the review of the Digital Markets Act, and in about a month, we will be publishing the review of the Foreign Subsidies Regulation. I won't spoil the outcome as regards to the Foreign Subsidies Regulation. So let me say a few words about the Digital Markets Act. Our first review has found that the DMA, Digital Markets Act, is fit for purpose and has opened up new opportunities for business while giving users more control over their experiences and devices, as well as access to more diverse and innovative digital products. Crucially, our work analyzing, reviewing, and modernizing competition policy has been done in parallel to sound competition enforcement. Under the DMA, we found non-compliance and imposed fines on Apple and Meta. We have also continued antitrust enforcement in the digital sector, adopting a fining decision in Google and Tech, while accepting binding commitments in Microsoft Teams. And the crucial work of investigating and punishing cartels has led to infringement decisions and fines in the end-of-life vehicle battery cartel, in the food delivery cartel, and in the fashion sector. All of this work may explain why sometimes it feels like it has been much more than 500 days. And about halfway through those 500 days, we adopted a major instrument putting the new approach into effect also in state aid. Indeed, about a year ago, we adopted the Clean Industrial State Aid Framework. I know that sometimes it's difficult to think why and how we can use state aid, to what extent, in order to accelerate our clean transition, we may count on the support of the governments. But at the very same time, we knew that this was something to address as quick as possible, and that there was a willingness for governments to step in to support their business community. And if this is the case, we needed a major step, a capacity to ensure that whatever it may happen could take place in a manner that did not break the single market. The CSAF, the Clean Industrial State Aid Framework, gives member states greater speed and predictability to support the transformation of the energy systems, the clean technologies, the strategic supply chains. But it also includes safeguards, because we don't want a subsidy race inside Europe. That would definitely weaken the competitiveness that we need and the cohesion that we seek to promote. At the end of last year, we also implemented a significant adaptation of the state aid rules for housing. Housing has become one of the major concerns of many Europeans. Before the summer break, the Commission will come forward with an Affordable Housing Act. This matters. While housing is at first sight a very local concern, it has become an EU priority because of the crisis that spans most of the continent. Beyond structural challenges, these first 500 days have also given us immediate crisis. It is one crisis after the other. Maybe it's a new world, and we need to pay attention into that, to improve preparedness, to facilitate the strengths, the strong and resilient economy that we need to build. This last crisis includes the situation in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. So, we thought that we could draw lessons from the past and identify what it could be, very targeted measures of support to those suffering the most in a very concrete temporary framework, to prevent this becoming a new normal also on how our economy works. A temporary stabilization tool was designed to preserve resilience, security of supply, and economic continuity under geopolitical stress. And we had lessons from the past that helped into this Middle East crisis temporary state aid framework. In the same context, the Commission also took measures beyond the state aid and presented the Accelerate EU. Among other things, we tried to push for a stronger coordination between member states and suggested measures to support consumers and industry. So we need to act on several fronts to address the impact of the war in Iran. But many measures should go far beyond from state aid and address the root causes that need to be fixed. In the same way, we need to be clear that the broader agenda is crucial also for competitiveness, the integration of our markets, the construction of a real single market is the best recipe. But Europe's competitiveness challenge needs more than competition tools. The deeper need, as I said, is the completion of the single market itself, tackling barriers to cross-border activity, fragmented capital markets, insufficient energy interconnections, and this requires a full-speed commitment coming from the high political leaders. Competition policy cannot compensate for the absence of single market integrations, either if it is in the banking sector, in the telecom, in the energy, in whatever field. No changes to merger control can substitute for a truly integrated European market. No intervention asking for security reasons should prevent the further integration of our markets. No subsidy framework can permanently compensate for fragmented capital allocation, and no industrial strategy will succeed if Europe continues to operate through 27 disconnected markets. And just as competition policy cannot be a fix-all, a distorted focus on simplification could not be very helpful either. We need to count on a simple way to achieve our goals. We need to avoid using this as a temptation to lower the standards that define the way we understand our society and our values. We have confirmed that this mandate is characterized by geopolitical turbulence. It is not because we choose it, but we cannot stay silent or frozen. We need to react and to adapt, being ready to stand up according to our own values and updating the way we implement our laws or define the way forward. In this poly-crisis that we are facing, in this era of uncertainty, our work is more important than ever. And being said in the very same manner that Mario Draghi expressed himself less than 1 month ago in Aachen, we are all alone together. I'm convinced that we can navigate this turbulence. I am sure that Europe has the strength to succeed. The world may be volatile, complex, unpredictable, uncertain, but we have the tools and the strengths, the capacities to make the effort to afford those challenges. If we remain united, if we keep on diving and updating the very same principles that illustrated and inspired the very construction of the European project. The challenges are real, but dear friends, I'm convinced that also are our strengths. The confidence, the audacity should guide us through the remaining 1,300 days of this Commission's mandate. That's our goal, that's our mission, that's our duty. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Madam Executive Vice President. And dear audience, now you'd have an exceptional opportunity to place questions to the Executive Vice President. It's perfectly fine if you are. For the sake of good order, if you could first please state your name, your title and the organization that you represent before putting your question. And of course, wait for the microphone. We have people online also following the event. So we have here in the front, lady, and then a gentleman.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here, taking the time and your interesting update. My name is Martina Castrén. I'm a partner at Finnish law firm Krogerus. I wanted to ask you a question about the merger guidelines. And I was wondering whether you think that modernizing the merger control framework by introducing or taking into account new aspects such as scale or resilience with the underlying objective of ensuring that European companies survive in global competition could at the same time create a risk that there is more gap between the European merger control framework or merger control and then national merger control, considering that small member states especially have a very strong focus on preserving competition at national level and local level even. Thank you.
We'll take the other question as well in the same.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much. My name is Olli Hyvärinen. I'm from Ministry of Economic Affairs of Finland. Thank you very much, Executive Vice President, for your insightful keynote and for the Commission for the extensive work in the field of competition and state aid policy. My question also deals with the merger control guidelines, which is, I guess, the hot topic of today. So Finland obviously welcomes the efforts to modernize the new framework in response to a changing economic and geopolitical situation. At the same time, we consider it important that merger control remains firmly based on competition effects. So my question would be, how will the Commission safeguard that competition effects remain at the core of merger assessment under the new guidelines? And you touched upon that in your speech, but could you a little bit elaborate how do you see the new broader policy objectives and the balance there between the safeguarding the competition? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for the two questions that, as you say, were very related, and that allows me to enter into the merger guidelines a bit deeper. I could say that it's been a very fantastic exercise. And on one side, there may be people that thought that this should be built as a kind of free pass. Whatever merger should be accepted and clear because it provides the scale. And of course, that could mean killing competition and killing the very relevant drivers that can help into boosting innovation and long-lasting, profitable and competitive business community. It doesn't make sense at all. In certain cases, we identify, and I made a comment on that, what it was being asked was a kind of national consolidation in a given market to gain a scale, nothing related to competition or creating European champions. On the contrary, I don't see how 27 national monopolies are going to compete globally on any field. That doesn't make sense. And in that case, we should be speaking much more of market integration. So accepting that one of the major strengths of Europe as such, and it will be increasingly the case, is playing as an union and having the scale to allow these eventual big national companies to enter into a cross-border growth strategy. But there was a third aspect that we wanted to take into consideration because it is fair. We know that things do change at a very fast track, and that innovation, unhappily resilience, and we try to give, to share our understanding of what we talk about when we talk about resilience. Sustainability may be key drivers in order to keep on building players that can compete globally and that can build on the complementarities to ensure that they can deliver, because in the absence of this merger operation, it could be difficult to provide these innovative deliveries or this resilience effect. And then the claim was, yes, but in fact is that if you only take into consideration references about the impacts on prices of today, it could be very difficult to think on the efficiencies, the benefits that could entail much longer cycles to be present. That was a fair point. So it's true, the time frame is different, and we need to incentivize this type of pro-competitive approaches that can help to gain solutions in our economy, and that in many cases deserve and require a different approach coming from the companies willing to join efforts to deliver. So what we try to reflect in the guidelines as the open and transparent share on how we read the criteria that we will be trying to assess, and how the different players and stakeholders being interested in this or in any type of operation could have a better understanding on what we could be seeking and what would be trying to confirm, if it is present, is this reference, resilience, sustainability, innovation, so that they can be recognized and facilitate the appealing call for investors to support the operation, but not as a free pass. Of course, price is still a key reference, not only for final consumers being households, but also for final consumers being business. So we cannot impose to other business, to other industrials, a kind of monopoly that could help or could drive into an abuse of a dominant position in a given market, because we accepted the free pass on that context. We need to assess how things may happen and how credible this eventual benefit is when being claimed. So we said, okay, yes, it's true, this may happen, and we need to take into consideration longer time frames. The things that are certain is today effects, but there may be a clear probability of positive effects if we take into consideration the dynamic approach when thinking on these efficiencies in the time to come. But then it has to be reasonable in terms of probability to be taken as something that compensates the eventual impact, negative impacts that could occur in a certain manner today. The other claim that was raised, and we considered that it was fair, is that, oh, but look, you go through your file with all the procedural guarantees and testing the market, asking for more information, and at the end you say no. And we don't know what we are responding. So it could be good if there is a kind of level playing field between those thinking that there may be harms associated to that operation, and you are the ones that establish or consider and frame the theory of harm behind any operation, and those that consider that this operation may be positive. And we thought that's also a fair point. Let's try to promote an early engagement in this conversation so that we can engage in an open exchange on where we see the theory of harm and where the business being involved in the operation see the eventual benefits. What I want to say is that this exercise tries to bring a forward-looking, updated understanding on why these references do matter and do have a public interest that deserves attention. We want to be pro-competitive, we want to attire innovation, we want to ensure that sustainability remains as a very positive aspect. We need resilience, and all these things in many cases need a kind of cooperation between business in order to deliver. But then it would be important, first, to be clear on the benefits. Second, to explain why the operation is the only way to get these benefits, and how robust is the theory of beneficiencies being behind. In exchange, we get this early engagement and this recognition of taking into consideration times in a much more broader context. It is now the time to end the process and to walk the path. And it could be fantastic to identify examples that facilitate this visibility on a pro-competitive merger that delivers and is clear. And of course, as it is normally the case, the first steps, the manner we handle, the level of soundness of the first operations is going to be quite key in order to address this thing. But coming back to the national and the European considerations, we also knew a couple of additional things. First, the national competition authorities in Europe are fantastic. We are very lucky. And they need our support because they make a great job. And the way we relate to each other is also very good. The level of cooperation between the national competition authorities and the DG competition is quite high, and that's good because that allows us to learn and to apply similar criteria and to identify where the problems may be and how we may solve or face these problems, or to use calling powers there where there may be options, legally speaking, to do so. But in certain occasions, and I guess that that's part of your question, it is not an issue of who solves, but how to prevent mergers that hide operations to kill innovation, or on the contrary, how to ensure that those that consider that the only way to grow is to count on a merger operation and think that in fact that's not going to have a negative impact in the market, but they don't feel like whether this could trigger an infringement case or an investigation, so they don't feel like entering into that. So we thought that it was also important to reflect in the guidelines some criteria that we consider important according to the case law and the experience on how we read killer acquisitions, and that's useful for the national competition authorities because normally it is below our threshold. And second, how we can provide a kind of innovation shield. What are the conditions that, if met, we consider the positive effects do not create any doubts to enter into this kind of operations. And final comment, as I said, strong appeal to national governments to make a narrow interpretation of their capacity to invoke security concerns to prevent operations that otherwise, being cross-border, could help into the development of a much more integrated market. And there have been previous experience in the past that have not helped in the construction of our capital union, for instance, or banking dimension. So I think that that's what it's present in the guidelines. The good thing is that you still have 15 days to comment. And as I said, we would be more than happy to get your feedback and to count on your ideas to end this process and to then enforce our guidelines. Thanks a lot. That's all.
Thank you, Executive Vice President. We would love to keep you the whole day if we could, but I see already the shaking of heads. So thank you once more, and the seminar here continues, but we wish you an excellent continuation of the day. So Kuoppamäki, the floor is yours.
Okay. I see we already started the discussion on the new merger guidelines, and I've been asked to kind of concentrate on that, so we will continue on that front. Well, it's competition and competitiveness, EU merger control, Draghi, and the Draghi report. And now, speaking of economic analysis, speaking of preserving competition, there's not just one model of preserving competition. There's not just one model of doing the merger control. There are many alternative possibilities, right? This is not a new topic. Now we have the kind of more static approach, kind of modeling SCB structure, modeling, concentrations, effects on prices and quality. That's kind of, but what we have is, well, merger control is always forward-looking, but we have a model that is more static, right? It's static. because the model is static. We are collecting information, doing analysis on that basis. It's a static model. And this has been criticized. And it's not a, new discussion. We have had it for 100 years. We have the perfect competition model, which is static. Then we had already 100 years ago, say, for instance, John Morris Clark, dynamic competition, that was criticizing after World War II, Alois Schumpeter criticizing we need a more dynamic model, right? We are in a situation now, globally, where kind of the old world has changed. We are losing the kind of old rule-based system at the moment, right? Free trade, etc. And this is one thing to do it, but the background to this is a Draghi report. I think many of you have read the Draghi report. Who has read it? Many have read it. And who has not heard of it? Everyone has heard of it, and you have at least read some, summaries of it, and the discussion, because it's a big discussion, because Europe is lagging behind US. 0.7% every year in growth, 0.7, and for just 1 year, 0.7% for Finland, for instance. We would have 0.7% more growth. It would be quite good for our employment situation, right? 0.7% is, 1 year is 7% in 10 years, 14% in 20 years, right? This is what we are missing. And this is something, of course, competition policy is aimed at a kind of keeping the economic system well functioning, right? I agree what Commissioner Ribera said also about curtailing private power. This is nothing new either, right? We had the kind of, when we started with the EU competition law, it was von der Groeben was the first commissioner. We had the ordoliberalism. The concept was basically curtailing economic power. Then we got Mario Monti, we got this kind of modern microeconomic tools. And now we have the new stage where we kind of want to move the economic analysis from the static economic analysis to a more dynamic economic analysis. Kind of that what it means basically is that you take a more long-term view on it. And what I think also is, it's, as I understand it, it's more an iterative, process-based approach. Companies are asked to go to authorities telling more about the efficiency background. And now it's kind of the difficult discussion topic, right? You don't that often discuss efficiencies. And why don't you discuss? Because efficiency defense can become an efficiency offense, right? You go to the authority and say, okay, we get these great efficiencies. And then you say, aha, this increases your market power, right? And this is something that is a very strange situation, extremely strange situation. If you think that the economic theory says that increasing efficiencies is a main driver for companies to do mergers, to do these structural transactions, right? Of course, it can also be of getting more market power, but economic efficiencies is a driver. This is what research says. And we are in a situation where efficiencies are not really discussed. My 5 cents to this discussion has been a paper I published 10 years ago. Is there a future for efficiency defense under EU merger rules? I was doing it with an economist called Torstila together, who was collecting doing the statistic and analysis, and I was writing the piece. And the conclusion is, no, there's no hope unless you change the rules. And now I see here an opening that you can have an iterative process. What I proposed is that we need to demystify the efficiencies. Demystify is that you discuss, and it's not good or bad, it's part of the analysis. It's part of the core analysis. And you look not only on the static side of it, but of the dynamic side of it. And that is an opening for better decision making, I think. We could have more weight on efficiencies. Efficiencies are important, and this is where I see the advantage of this. Static analysis is one way of doing merger control. More dynamic analysis, another way doing merger control. We have had these tool sets for a long time. You just change the approach a bit. But this is the Draghi's findings are that Europe lags behind, and he made kind of in this report kind of the recommendations that you should kind of open up the process more for relying on innovation and efficiencies. And you should have more weight on innovation and future-looking approach in Commission's decision-making. Of course, the evidence should be specific enough. It should not just, wishful thinking. But this is kind of the idea. Okay, we have today a more static analysis, and we would efficiency defense plays really not almost any role nowadays, for the regrettable reasons I mentioned. It's kind of a difficult discussion topic, so to say. I know of cases where efficiency defenses have been prepared but not used because the risk of this kind of turning around, right? And you should have this kind of, like I said, iteration, discussion. Okay. But we'll see then how it goes the dynamic. But this is what you could basically get. This kind of potential dynamic benefit, faster innovation, basically, investment and expansion, then dynamic efficiencies, and of course, if you think of merger control, almost all cases, are decided in phase one. You don't need to do all this. It would be probably you have the iteration in many cases, but in most cases you see that there's no such concentration that you would need to. If you look at Commission's decisional practice, for instance, you get the 3 weeks decisions. Most of the decisions are cleared in this fast track anyway. So it does not, but the basic idea is materially this, what I explained. As I understood, I read the guidelines, and now I'm not too concerned that this would be industrial policy, or we would kind of stop doing this kind of competition analysis where harmful mergers are prevented. If I read the guidelines, yes, there are passages on this kind of dynamic defense, but it's still 100 pages of document. Of most of it is kind of all the possible reasons, all the various reasons the Commission can use to block a merger. So this is not a revolution; it's rather an evolution. Okay, but the other side is dynamic theories of harm, right? Pipeline overlap, R&D cases, we've seen it's a pharmaceutical cases, some good research is discontinued. Innovation paces could be slowed down as a result of the concentration. You should lose some expansion you have. So it goes also this way, so that you have not only dynamic benefits, but also dynamic harms on the table. Okay, what are the challenges? Well, forward-looking analysis is of course more difficult, it's more uncertain, right? You need a stable method for measuring these effects. What I would like to see before, I form my opinion, can think on this further, are the economic studies that are under preparation, where you will see more on Commission's economic approach. But basically, I think this is a good thing. Then innovation, sustainability, and resilience. Well, we have sustainability already in the horizontal guidelines, right? And this was kind of, Finland was many years ago the chair country of EU, and it was kind of started there, and then it led to the horizontal guidelines. And now we would do something similar as regards sustainability or mergers. For me, I think that we are reaching, as regards the global warming, the parabolic stage, or a state of no return, right? So I think from that perspective, kind of broadening the scope of also competition rules is necessary. I mean, the traditional thinking has been that this is something for environmental agencies, right? That's not enough. We don't have the time. We don't have the time. We need to do horizontally on all fronts what can be done. And this is a reason because why this should be pushed, in my opinion. Resilience has more to do with kind of the global situation, kind of the pressure coming from east and from the west, right? And where Europe needs to kind of, we have crisis after crisis, and I'm not sure what is really how much can be done on the merger front on this, but it's an important topic. Innovation shield. This is something basically the idea is that there's a startup, a merger regarding a startup that you could have kind of a fast track for approval of these. So because the European problem is scaling up, right? It's a Finnish problem also. The problem is scaling up. We have many good startups, but it's one thing to create a great new product. But then when you want to make it a global product, you need the marketing muscle, you need hundreds of millions, maybe billions in building factories, etc. And this is kind of in the startups, kind of in the business plan, mostly that, you create it and then someone buys you and you get the check and then you continue maybe in the company. And so it's kind of, the other side is then the killer acquisitions, right? But we can, that's the kind of the risk that some of my academic colleagues have commented that that this would kind of could be harmful. But when we have the killer acquisition discussion, we often forget that, the small company needs the kind of the bigger company for scaling up in many situations for resource reasons. So, but it's of course we would need to fix the Illumina grade situation, right? When we do this, how we deal with real killer applications. But I see kind of policy-wise, the bigger question for Europe is bad scaling up that needs to be improved. This is okay, what does it mean? What dynamic analysis means for merger control? Well, we have broader theories of harm. We will have a forward-looking counterfactual. meaning basically that we have longer horizons in kind of looking timely-wise. Efficiencies arguments are upgraded. I hope it needs to this kind of demystification of the efficiency discussions, because these are issues that should be discussed in context of mergers in detail. It's not about industrial policy. It's about more informed decision-making in competition law and economics, in my opinion. It has the risks that have been mentioned, but I see it depends how it's written and how it's then applied. And then, of course, there's a court thing, CK Telecoms, for instance, decision. It's not just about structural things. You need to do this kind of change in the policy anyway, because the courts are demanding it. CK Telecoms being the one of the examples of that. But it's a more challenging analysis. There are more uncertainties, and there will be new demands on competition authorities and courts. That's clear. It's not an easy, right? A lot of work involved, a lot of new thinking involved, but a lot of interesting things to work with. Okay, where the draft can be improved. This is just a draft. Well, it's an advanced draft. You know, there's been a lot of work put into it. Maybe I would make the shield more explicit in the guidelines. Then the second is, number 2, this is very important. If we want to make the efficiency defense, efficiency arguments to count, really you need to fix the transaction specificity point. This meaning that you count only on efficiencies that are transaction specific, and the understanding of this has been that there's no other way to do the deal. Of course, you can always say there's some other way, or at least argue there's some other. So this is one of the reasons why the efficiency arguments have not really fared well in the process. The draft must improve the likelihood of winning the efficiency argument. This would be kind of my fix. Lower bar for transaction specificity needed. Because it's always, you do a merger, you know, you have like 20 things you are thinking about. And then competition being one. And of course, then when you choose, you go this way, then you have chosen a way and you have excluded the other alternatives. And this is kind of one thing. Okay, same criteria both sides, yes, that's already there, but the draft discusses much less benefits than harm, actually so. But of course it's understandable, this is a Commission's document, but maybe we could add some more. When we get the economic studies that are not yet there, it could be kind of improved upon those. Then there's a question for buy-in for new defenses, so like sustainability. Do competition authorities feel this is a good thing? Are they willing to invest into this? Resilience, competitiveness require maybe, well, it's always of thinking a bit new. I assume that, of course, that national authorities would over time, maybe if the Commission changed the approach, we at least in Finland in past have tried to keep our analysis close to the EU model. So we'll see, of course, it's up to authorities, but I would assume this would be the outcome in many cases, and there's new thinking involved. And then, you know, the Illumina grade, it's an uncertainty there. One should fix it one way or another. So this is my humble guess that we would, in Finland, we would kind of change a bit the analysis if this is approved, but of course it's just my guess. Guess I'm not the decision maker here, but I would assume we've done it in the past. If this is passed, I would assume that we would do it going forward. Then the second point is implication dynamic evidence is resource incentive. It can be a capacity question for authorities, smaller authorities in particular. Then there can be divergence of risk of dynamic and competitiveness, so that this is not read as industrial policy. I don't need the Commission's draft at all as industrial policy basic. I read it as a new, broader, more forward-looking competition analysis on the merits. This is how I read it. But of course it could be read as okay, now in this and that country this is good for us if we give a green light even if competition reasons would not stand for it. So this is of course always a risk. And I mentioned already the killer acquisitions. We had a discussion in Finland a few years ago about this calling powers, and if this goes through, I assume we will have a new discussion on the calling powers. Then conclusions. In my opinion, the dynamic turn is right, and future will tell whether it sharpens or softens the merger control. I don't see it would really soften it. It would be a different approach. Well, most cases will continue to be cleared in phase one anyway, so this will be kind of the change for more for critical cases. And for me, the most important thing seems to be that this is an opening for an iterative process in which theories of benefits as theories of harm can be discussed early on and will be discussed early on. This is a key kind of process thing in my opinion. This will open up the possibility of digging early on, much deeper into the motivations and effects of the merger. And last but not least, I already said this is not about industrial policy, but the welcome change that has a promise of improving the merger process. Thank you. Okay, if there are questions, please. Bertell.
I have one question.
Wait at the microphone.
Petri Market Code. I have one question. Do you see that the theories of benefits and theories of harm should be in the future be handled together so that we don't have an efficiency defense, but that it's a common argument?
It's a common argument, yes. That's it would exactly be that you discuss this early on. Maybe the old is kind of the efficiency defense. You have it in your back pocket. Do I dare to use it or not? But you discuss it up front. This is the idea. And this is kind of what I said, so 10 years ago, I was not able to envisage this turn. But the idea was to demystify the discussion. And it would be upfront, like you said, Bertell. Yes. There was a second question or comment. Okay. Any other? Yes.
Thank you, Petri, for sharing your thoughts. I'm Lena Lindberg from Krogerus. Just to ask the same question my colleague asked from Mrs. Ribera, that whether you see any let's say, difficulties for the Finnish authorities to apply our SEEK test and include the resilience and other elements into our their assessment, or should we do something for our legislation, or how should we tackle it in Finland, keeping in mind that the test says that they can intervene in a transaction which has effects even in a local market, as Martin just said.
Well, I would say that I mean the Commission has the same SIEC test, with copy-based SIEC test from EU, right? From the EU regulations. So there's no legislative change. So for that reason, I'd say that we need to kind of rewrite the guidelines. That would be it would be a second guideline on the guideline level. I would not envisage immediately how we would need to kind of change the kind of material content of the Competition Act on the prohibition threshold, because it's basically quite similar or same as the EU, right? We have the national, but national law, but it's in a sense, so to say, harmonized with the EU in material sense. Yeah. Okay. There are two more. Yeah. You were first.
Rokeros. I have a question concerning these new policy considerations, more investment, more innovations, resilience, security. Do you think that these are relevant also under Article 101, for example, assessing joint production, joint venture, or are these just related to merger control assessment?
It could be also joint production, joint ventures, right? Why not?
Yeah, I think very same.
Yeah, I agree with you, yeah.
Lotta Väänänen, Compass Lexicon. Thanks for your interesting points. I would like to hear your opinion on benefits from the perspective that in the draft there's mentioned that the benefits should accrue to the same group of consumers that the harm goes to. How do you see that in regard to things like sustainability benefits that typically are an externality that should spill over to the wider group of the whole society, or innovation as well, where there are many externalities?
That's a very good point, and I would change that phrase in the guidelines for the reason that we worked with sustainability things and changed it in for the horizontal guidelines, and I was asked to help the Finnish government at that point, kind of in that thinking. But they have the master card standard in the guidelines. I mean, it needs to be same consumer, same contract area. You can argue maybe I don't think that's ideal for 101 either, but it makes no sense for mergers, and I tell you why. We are speaking of global warming. The gases go up and then they form this umbrella, right? That keeps the heat in, and then the effects happen where they happen, North Africa or Gulf Stream or whatever. It's absolutely impossible to say, I'd say the global market is Tellus, I mean the Earth, and Earth atmosphere, and the customers or the ones who get the benefits that's mankind and animals and plants and everything, right? This kind of masters, intellectually the master card decision standard does not make much sense to me, my opinion, and I think there has been some discussion on the sustainability in some expert works already, for some beginning of this year and last year, and I hope the outcome would be that we don't have these territorial limitations that would not make much sense.
Thank you, Professor. Very insightful, very thought-provoking presentation. Thank you for all those questions. I think we could go on much longer, but I think it's time to let our practitioners also give their views. So thank you once more, and I'm sure the discussion continues.
Yes.
So let me introduce our next speakers. We'll go in alphabetical order. Ilkka Aalto-Setälä. He is a partner at Geradin Partners Attorneys. He advises companies and governmental agencies on antitrust and international market law at the national and EU levels. He is Tier 1 ranked by Chambers and Partners and highlighted in the Legal 500 Hall of Fame. Ilkka, welcome. Sanna-Maria Bertell is a Chief Policy Advisor at the Confederation of Finnish Industries, specializing in public markets and competition law. Prior to joining the Confederation, she held senior roles in leading consumer goods and ICT companies. Welcome. Rainer Lindberg is Director at the Finnish Competition Consumer Authority. He holds degrees in economics as well as law from the University of Helsinki and master's degree in EU competition law from King's College London. Welcome. Jussi Nieminen is a partner and head of competition and procurement at Castrén&Snellman Attorneys. He advises domestic and international clients on a broad range of competition law matters and regulatory compliance. He regularly supports clients in navigating the regulatory aspects of complex M&A transactions. Welcome. Now, dear colleagues, we've heard the Executive Vice President talk about the challenges Europe is facing and the policy requirements that Europe needs to meet. And if we look at also the soft law instruments that the Commission has published in the past 500 days, they do make several references to policy goals pressing on Europe. To name but a few, the foreign subsidies guidelines clarifies that competitiveness is one of the union policies that can be considered in the balancing test under the FSR. And the draft merger guidelines explain how important it is to incentivize mergers that enhance competitiveness. And they also mention security and resilience, for example, as factors that contribute to Europe's competitiveness. Now, from a practitioner's perspective, does this mean that we've entered a new era of competition enforcement? Or is this just the same story as before, maybe wrapped in a little bit of a different wrapping? Maybe Ilkka, if you begin.
Yes, absolutely. Competition law is increasingly expected to contribute to broader policy objectives. Absolutely, we can see it in the merger draft guidelines. And that brings us to the defense rights. Indeed, that's something that is missing in this discussion on competitiveness. Indeed, strong rights of defense, they are not merely a rule of law requirement, they are also an issue of competitiveness. Because only if businesses are, businesses are more willing to invest, innovate, and make transactions if they can see that the process is due, fair, and predictable. So defense rights are essential elements of the process, and I wish to bring that element into the discussion on competitiveness.
Sanni.
Maybe I'll take it from here. I think, maybe in the spirit of the draft guidelines, I think it really depends how you read them. If you read the preamble, yes, there's a lot of industry policy kind of arguments there. But when you read the bread text, I think it's a different picture. I think what it does, our lack of growth, what it does and what the Draghi report did was to put a little bit fire in the belly. I think it was the draft guidelines or the renewal of the guidelines was long overdue. I think if the DG Comp would have been left to its own devices to kind of, draft it as they like, it could have looked a little bit different. But I don't think this is a major shift. I think we see the kind of the undertones of like the, let's say that we need to modernize, we need to kind of face the geopolitical reality. But in the end of the day, it's not that different. It's more dynamic. It's definitely like intellectually more ambitious. And I think when we kind of, sort out the details, we'll be, better for it. Because in the end of the day, if we look at the Finnish market, there hasn't been growth, so we share the same sickness. I think that there are companies who don't even, look for growth. They don't even dare to, expand to, our neighboring markets. In this case, probably Sweden, not the other way around. But, what they are focused on is that, can I make the payroll? Can I, hire somebody? They're not in that mindset yet. So what we need to do is now just kind of, try to ensure that we put all our efforts in protecting the market, increasing competitiveness, and what I especially love to see is, how we are going to use these new guidelines to foster innovation. And that's going to be, one of the bigger discussion points moving forward. I don't know what the answer is yet, but I'm really willing to listen, what people and the practitioners are seeing where we should go. So, I think it's future looking.
Rainer.
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, thank you very much on behalf of the authority to be invited to this panel. And I have many colleagues here, so we are very glad to be in this day today. I took from your question, you asked whether we are in a new era. So it's a fine line because what is a new era and what is just, things are just going on all the time. If you take a competition policy in a broader view and a long timeline, so there's always happening something in economy, regulations, companies, sectors change, things like that. So, but whether we are in a new era, I guess there are 4 reasons why we can say that we are in a new era until the next era begins. First one is that in many countries the economy is in a bad shape, and I know many of my colleagues and our colleagues in other countries they face tough questions. Questions like, is competition a solution or is it a problem? So it's the overall macroeconomic situation can play a role. I'm not saying it's playing everywhere a role, but it can play a role. So that's certainly one factor why we are in a new era for now. The second point is about trade policy. We all know this, but trade policy it's always been there, but now it's more interlined with competition policy, one way or the other. The third point why I think we are in a new era is that the Commission has new powers, foreign subsidies regulation, DMA. I know they are not quite recent, but anyway, they are part of a toolkit, so that's the way we are in a new era. And the last point is that there are more and more calls for taking other policies into the picture, into the enforcement. Professor Kuoppamäki mentions sustainability. What could be another example? Data protection. If you read the Court of Justice ruling in Facebook Meta the Court of Justice says that whenever you competition authorities apply competition law which is related to data protection, you should cooperate with the regulators. So those are my 4 points why I guess we are in a new era. But it's a fine line, what is a new era and what is just that lots of things are going on. But maybe we are in a new era. Thank you.
Jussi.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would have to say that I very much echo Sanna-Maria's comments. And I also am of the opinion that this is not sort of, the new merger guidelines are not sort of a revolution, but rather an evolution of the existing practice. And thinking about your question, Jani, on whether we are kind of at the verge of a new era, I would perhaps approach it from a practitioner's perspective and also reflect a bit on what the new merger guidelines might mean from the point of view of a competition law practitioner in merger control matters going forward. And certainly, I think that the main practical implication probably is this sort of new balancing between the theory of benefit and theory of harm. If it indeed would lead to a setup that Professor Kuoppamäki was also referring to, sort of a more discussion already in the pre-notification phase about the theory of benefit as well and balancing the various efficiencies, that obviously would lead to very different type of preparation phase for notifications. It might also mean that you would need to adopt a different approach to assessing the various types of evidence at the Commission, and you would also need to pay significantly more attention to vetting internal documents and various types of submissions, and also probably early involvement of economists as well. So from that angle, from a practitioner's point of view, I would say that we are probably looking at something new, but how and its form will it materialize? It is still open and to be seen.
Good. Now, I see that the merger guidelines is something that many of you mentioned, and Sanni, you mentioned innovation. But you have also written about, I think, something else is very interesting and that I'd like to explore a bit. The draft merger guidelines, they have a section on purchasing markets. And they discuss there explicitly employment markets. Could you explain a bit about that and how you see this? Is it something new and any takeaways from that? And by the way, before commenting, also others, if you have then any quick comments on this or your positions, would be interested to hear those as well.
Yes, maybe I start by saying that I work for the employers of Finland. So every time when I see that the Commission or DG Comp is reaching out or grabbing on employment matters, of course, I pay attention. But I think, to be honest, I think this is a part of a bigger picture. The guideline or the draft really shows that on top of this theory of benefits, there are also new theories of harm, and the employment market side of it is part of that equation. There's also the entrenchment, which follows the booking merger case, and I think I think we should pay attention to the fact that these are a bit new, and to me the link to actual law is a bit weak. So when it doesn't really follow we are looking at, does this impede significantly effective competition? Well, if it's a, theory of harm on employment, I think there the parallel to, service or product market is a little bit far-fetched. And this monopsony theory, I think it's coming from the States. It's been criticized over there as well. And for us Nordic people, I think, where we always react, at least from the lobbying side, is that, take your hands off our, Nordic labor market model. And I think, honestly, this would, if the Commission wants to pursue this kind of, avenue of theory of harm, I think it just may lead to, more complexity, uncertainty, and in the end of the day, what the companies want, what the filing companies want is, predictability, certainty, and clear rules. I really did pay attention, and I think this is something that hasn't been, it's been surprisingly, I would say, ignored almost in the conversation. But again, it's just one of those many details in this new proposition.
Correct to summarize that not only did you pay attention, but maybe you're not welcoming it with a fully open heart.
No, I think the answer is no, thank you.
Ilkka, you had something to
Just a quick
comment.
I think it's very difficult to think of a situation where you have a monopsony power, a lot of power in your procurements without having market power on your sales side. So I think it's a very peculiar situation as such. So I think power in procurements, it's only one element in assessing market power. It's a competitive advantage that needs to be taken into account. It's just an evolution. It's not a revolution in that sense. So I'm not afraid that would open any new theory of harm in itself. It's just an element like any other elements of competitive advantages.
Well, maybe
Sure.
just
Sure.
one comment from my side as well. The thing, at least that I see, from the practical point of view, with the labor market-related theories of harm, is first of all the difficulty in kind of measuring that impact. That's probably not an easy task. Labor markets are working in a very different way than traditional products and services types of market. There are different parameters impacting the wages and conditions that workers are facing. So I'm also not convinced that merger control is the most effective way to tackle these topics. And perhaps this would be something to give some further thought that is the right place in the merger guidelines to have the labor law related theories of harm, or would it be possible to think potentially that those harms would also be resolved when you are kind of protecting effective competition?
We'll stay with you, Jussi, actually. You did mention about, well, say, theory of benefit, theory of harm, and preaching this to what also Professor Kuoppamäki spoke a lot about is efficiencies. One hears a lot of complaints, and I think it came out also from the professor's presentation, that it is very difficult to enter a efficiency defense, and that the guidelines or the guidance that the Commission has given previously has been very little, very abridged. That's the complaint one hears often. Now, the new draft merger guidelines, they are much expanded on the efficiency section and go into much more detail about the topic. So is this a game changer?
Well, I totally agree that there is a lot more now in the draft guidelines about efficiencies, and also even up to a level that there are various kind of economic tools, and the guidelines are explaining how the assessment of efficiencies with regard to various types of efficiencies is actually going to be done. But I agree with the comment that Professor Kuoppamäki mentioned earlier, that it is of course a two-way street in a way. When we talk about, for example, scale efficiencies, they can quite easily turn into or feed into a theory of harm regarding, for example, entrenchment of dominant position, or foreclosure in some other way. So I would really have to say that this depends a lot on how the Commission in practice will weigh in its practice the theories of benefit and theories of harm. One thing that I've also wondered is that could it be the case that going forward there would be more requests for information to explain theories of benefit in further detail towards the merging parties, which might be kind of changing something. But the fact in any way that this will be an integral or integrated analysis of theories of benefit and theories of harm certainly means that these aspects have to be carefully thought through. It is already the case because of the more kind of clear distinction between direct effects and dynamic effects. So I guess that you have to think about both efficiencies and theories of harm more carefully from a dynamic point of view going forward.
Rainer, you mentioned in a previous intervention maybe these new fields or fields where the Commission is active, and the comments by the court. Could this be seen as also a discussion between the powers of the Union vis-à-vis the powers of member states? And looking from say, a country like Finland's perspective and from Europe's perspective, is it good that we would have, say, one set of rules everywhere, coherently throughout Europe, or to have some national leeway? Which do you think works best, and what would be the pros and cons? Which works best for competitiveness?
Yes, thank you. I guess answering to this question, or at least trying to answer this question, we have to step away from the merger area and to Regulation 1/2003, which is, by the way, in the pipeline to be renewed. I guess it's a certainty that there will be a new Commission's proposal early 27 maybe. But anyway, that's the area where we can deal with national law and EU law. Now, somebody might say that it's a boring topic to discuss about national law and EU law, because there's a whole lot of case law which says that EU law prevails and supremacy and so. But Article 3 is something I guess Finland, almost from economic perspective, we should pay attention to what's going on with Article 3 on Regulation 1. Why so? Well, this is not a new tension, but there is a tension between stakeholders, if I put it this way. Article 3, as you know, it says that if you have a case, one or two case with trade effect, you should apply EU law, fine. But in terms of Article 1 or 2, you can be stricter if there's a unilateral action. There's a history why you can be stricter nationally in unilateral actions, but the criticism now is that maybe that was okay 20 years ago when Regulation 1 was implemented, but now there are voices, strong voices already from the business area as well, that the EU markets become too fragmented. They become too fragmented if, let's say, I'm a company and I'm thinking to go abroad. Thinking to go to other European countries, and I play by the EU rules. But then all of a sudden, I face stricter enforcement, national enforcement. It might mean that I have a new antitrust hurdle there, and that might block my entry to other EU markets. Those who say that no, you shouldn't touch Article 3 because it's important nationally, because there can be national, I'm not saying public interest, but a bit similar things, that we need the Article 3, because in some cases we need to be regionally or locally or in terms of some valuable things that our member state will cherish. We need Article 3, just in case. So that will be the discussion. But why I mentioned that it could be an economic issue is that really Finland is a country which is exporting, and we want to export things. We are open economy. So the question is, I think, later next year or year after that, maybe next year, that are we willing to have a level playing field, and we leave Article 3, we renew Article 3. If we read the latest statements from the Finnish government, the current government, and if you read the quite a lot of statements from the Commerce Committee, talousvaliokunta of the Finnish Parliament, the message is very clear. Finland wants to have a level playing field fully. But let me see then how it goes. But again, it's not just a boring national law, EU law issue, it's an economic issue, I think.
Then we move to Ilkka. I think you already mentioned the importance of the rights of defense for competitiveness. Could you elaborate a bit? How do you think they should be developed, or should they be developed at the European level, and why not domestically as well?
Yes, thank you. Indeed, we have heard that there are different kind of benefits to balance, different kind of harms and different objectives, labor issues and sustainability issues. A whole lot of elements that need to be taken into account in the overall assessment. So it's vitally important that the system and the structure ensures that the enforcement is focused on the competitive process itself, which at the end of the day brings along those benefits. And interestingly, if we look at the ECN Plus directive, or if we take seriously the OECD's reports, where they stress that competition authorities should enjoy independence from political influence. If we take that into account, we could as well ask, how does the European Commission itself acts freely, independently? Is it really independent from the political influence? Because at the end of the day, the commissioners are politicians, and that would not be possibly allowed for a national competition authority. So, as independence is very essential for national competition authorities, the question is, should we also be discussing how to strengthen the institutional independence of competition enforcement at the EU level? Could the European Commission be disconnected from the European competition enforcement in order to maintain pure competition enforcement? Now that we see how different kind of policies tries to get involved, including labor policy issues.
So would you be advocating for a European competition regulatory authority that is independent of the Commission and would be tasked with the implementation of certain pieces of legislation?
That would be worth considering. Certainly we can find pros and cons in that regard, but it would be very logical to think it seriously because of the OECD, because of the ECN Plus directive, which clearly tries to disconnect. So do we need a great disconnection?
I think there's a comment, Sanna.
I think it's an interesting idea. And I'm not just saying because, you know, I mean, it's not just a compliment, Ilkka. But again, I mean, I think that would have certain benefits. I mean, you know, strong independent authority is the market's best friend. You know, I mean, the way the political process works in Finland is a little bit different from the Commission or from the EU, because I mean, we can see the clear line from the Draghi report to mission letters, and then this kind of boils down to an interesting interplay between industrial policy objectives and you know, and consumer welfare, and this was on a, you know, full display when the, you know, draft merger guidelines were announced. You know, if you compare the kind of the, you know, announcement and speeches by and between Madame Ribera and von der Leyen, you know, they had a, you know, little bit different tone, I think. And again, you can see it also in the draft guidelines where there's a little bit of tension between, you know, greater policy objectives versus then, you know, individual case assessments. Again, I think DG Comp has held the fort so far, but I think it could be strengthened. So this is something really that we should be discussing about, because it's never really apolitical with the Commission and the initiatives, is it?
If you want to say something. We can also ask the audience if you have any comments or any questions to the panelists.
Okay, Thea Broms, the Deputy Director, DG Competition. So thank you, first of all, very much for a very balanced discussion. I think there were very good ideas, I mean, which have been kind of raised today. To this very last point, I would say quite interesting point, and it has also surfaced every 10 years, this question about an independent authority. We must also remember that there is a role for DG Competition within the Commission as a whole. Of course, our investigations are done by DG Competition. We have to, of course, consult all the other DGs concerned, and it's a college level that takes the big decisions. But we are very independent in our investigations, that we must say. When it comes to the legislation, new guidelines, of course, I mean, there also we consult, and it is very important to gather the overall view of the whole college of, I mean, commissioners. But we have a role when it comes to any other legislation that comes from the Commission to see that the competition principles are built in, whether it's industrial policy legislation, whether it's anything else. So we are a guardian also from our side to the treaty, and that the other part, I mean, other part of the legislation also complies with competition principles. So this is what I wanted to bring to this discussion, and I know this discussion is not only raised here, it's been also elsewhere. But thank you very much for today's discussion. Congratulations to the organizers.
Other comments, questions? Yeah. Everybody's already waiting for the drinks that are waiting outside. Anything you want to add? Yeah, we are a few minutes behind schedule now, but I think this is a good point then to thank the panelists for their input and the interesting views, and for the audience for being interested in competition policy, competition rules, and in shaping Europe. Thank you, and indeed there should be some drinks waiting outside. Let's continue the discussion still with a few classes in our hands.